Hi, my name is Annika Fagerstrom, and this is my ADA Accessibility Assessment Project. So I chose to do my assessment on the Willard Building. The Willard Building is located on Pollock Road. I thought it was really fitting because Willard Building is one of the most popular buildings on campus. Almost every single person that attends Penn State has a class there, so I thought many different types of people would be going in and out, so it would be a really good building to look at and see if it was accessible. Excuse me. So we're going to look at priority 1 first, which is the accessible approach and entrance. So first I looked at the route of travel. So I went to the Pollock Road entrance, which has this ramp here, which is one of the accessible entrances. And the other accessible entrance is actually around back where the parking lot is. It's a flat pathway to the ground level entrance. So we'll look at that more later when we talk about parking lots and such, but I just wanted to mention that now. So both entrances appeared to be stable, firm, and slip resistant. This one here in particular is made with concrete. If you look really closely, you can actually see like blue crystal salt chips that get away the ice. So if there were ice, people with and without disabilities would both have issues trying to get in. So I considered this to be slip resistant. Both entrances also had curb cuts in several locations, which is great. And all objects that protruded less than 4 inches from the wall and were within 27 inches of the ground. So next I'm going to show you a video of me actually walking up the ramp to show you how accessible it is. As you can see, there is plenty of room to get up and move around, especially if you were in a wheelchair or anything like that. So next I looked at the ramps. So as you saw, the ramp before was outside. Now we're looking at the ramp inside. Both slopes appeared to be no greater than the 1:12 ratio. I actually measured the one inside, but the one outside seemed very difficult to measure just because how it was built and you couldn't really follow the incline. So all ramps had railings on both sides, which is awesome. The ramp seemed very sturdy. This ramp in particular was 35.5 inches high at the highest point. So the widths between the railings were 67 inches. And this ramp, if you look really closely, doesn't really appear to be non-slip. There is a little non-slip strip at the bottom and at the top, but on the way up, it seems like you might be able to slip down. So if they installed some non-slip padding, that would make it a lot better. And there were no ramps that were longer than 30 feet in Willard, but each had a landing space that was longer than 5 feet. And there were no ramps that connected to other ramps in the building as well. So here's just some more pictures of the outside ramp. The one on the top left is similar to the one we saw before. This picture on the bottom left is, you kind of saw in the video when I walked in, there's a large amount of space that anyone can move in and out. And then here's the sturdy railings on the picture in the right. So here's where we go to parking and the drop-off areas. So I counted all the spaces, and there's 26 spaces in total. 4 of which of those spaces were accessible spaces, which is more than they actually needed, which is great. So each space was bigger than 8 feet with access aisles that were wide, and there were no vertical obstructions. One access aisle actually wasn't right next to one of the spaces. It was near the part of the entrance, but it wasn't right next to one of the spaces, so I thought that might cause an issue. So if they could just paint the parking spot next to it with the extra shaded lines, that would solve that issue. Each space was van accessible. You'll see in a closer up picture of the signs that it does say that. And they were also marked with the international symbol of disability. So 3/4 access aisles were 3 out of 4, were part of the accessible route. And there was an enforcement procedure to ensure accessible parking. And there was a sign that warrants a fine. Here's one of the spaces I was talking about. This, in the picture on the left, the space to the right doesn't have the accessible aisle next to it. So I thought if they would do the space to the right again, if they just shaded that in, it would be better. And then that could help with getting in and out. And the picture on the right shows the reserved parking sign it has the international symbol. It also has the van accessible sign and that the fine sign saying that violators are subject to fine and towing. So here's a parking lot video just to show you a little bit more. So this actually shows if you wanted to go the longer way around the building, but the picture from the last slide actually showed if you wanted to get to the ground level entrance, but this video would show if you were going to the Pollock Road entrance. Okay, so now we have some more about entrances. I would also like to apologize for how my video looks in the past 6 minutes of this video. I don't know why it was coming out that way. My program just wasn't working, so I apologize for that. I think I have it fixed now. So, like I said before, ramps are located where stairs are needed. There's one exception though, on the main entrance, where the main entrance of Willard is that most students use, that it's right across from Old Main. There are actually no ramps at all. It's just a large set of stairs. So you would not be able to use that entrance if you have disability. So not all accessible entrances also have signs indicating where the location of the nearest accessible entrances, but I found it interesting that inside the building they indicated that. I don't know why they didn't on the outside. So they just need to easily install some signs on that main entrance across from Old Main so people know where to go. Alternate entrances are able to be accessed independently as well, like you saw the ramps. It seemed like someone with a disability could easily access those areas. Also, all doors had at least 32 inches of clearing. Most were 35 inches actually. And all doors had clear wall space of at least 18 inches, and most were actually 35 inches or more, so that's actually really great. So entrances continued. All doors appeared to have a beveled edge of 3/4 inches or less. All carpets or mats inside doors were 1.5 inches or less, and the edges appeared to be securely installed. They weren't actually connected to the ground, but you can kind of see in this picture here that the mat on the outside had like a smaller level than like the actual mat itself, and it was like heavier, so it would hold it down easily. If they wanted it to be even more secure, they could get something actually installed, but it doesn't seem like those were too much of a problem. Also, the door handles were no higher than 48 inches. Most were actually 36 inches. All doors were operable with a closed fist. And if they weren't, they had the automatic buttons you could press with a closed fist. And you can actually see that on the button right there on the left in the picture. So some of the doors were actually pretty heavy. All doors appear to be 4 pounds or less, especially inside. Inside, the doors felt like you had to use a lot less pressure, but the doors outside and maybe inside could even be a little bit lighter. So they would just have to install different doors. All door closers took more than 3 seconds. Most were 9 seconds or more. There was one I think we'll see later on that actually took like 15 or 16 seconds. So that's really awesome too. So here are just some more pictures about the entrances. Here's on the left is one of the maps I talked about that shows the accessible entrances that are barrier free. You can see that on the map. And here's actually the picture on the right is the door that's after the door you just saw in the previous picture. So there's 2 doors there, and you can see the button on the left in that picture as well to open it up. So next we're going to go to priority 2, which is access to goods and services. So horizontal circulation. This space in the picture here on the right is the space that actually comes after the picture, the doors in the picture we saw on the last slide. So the accessible entrances provide direct access to the main floor, lobby, and elevator. All access routes to public spaces are at least 36 inches wide. Many were actually 119 inches or longer, like this space right here was huge. So there's plenty of room for a person using a wheelchair to reverse directions. So it was over 10 feet in most cases. So next we're going to talk about doors. So all doors had 36 inches or more of clearing. Pull doors had 28 inches of clear wall space to allow for space when you would open the door like this. And doors could be opened without too much force. Like I said before, that some could be lighter and some may have been over 5 pounds of force. It was really hard to tell. So like I said before, they could install lighter doors just to make it easier for everyone. Even I have some trouble opening the door sometimes, or if I'm holding other things. The highest door handles happened to be 37 inches off the ground, and the threshold edges were 3/4 inches or less. Sorry, here's a video. You can see opening of one of the doors with my fist. And you can see that it leads right into the first floor and like the main area. Here's just some more pictures of the doors. Here's kind of what I was talking about with the handles. The picture on the left, I could have used just my fist to get that door open, but the picture on the right would be a lot harder. You can't really fit your fist into that little door handle there, so that would definitely need to be changed, which they could easily install a different kind of handle on that door. So next we have rooms and spaces. So I actually went to one of the classrooms, and I'll play this video in a moment. But the space of the aisles and the pathways really dependent on how you move the desk. Usually is between 28 inches and 56 inches. And I have highlighted in the red over here that desks and tables can be arranged at any time, so you can make room for people to come through. And there was no 5-foot circle for turnaround space, but you can rearrange the furniture so it can be different. So I don't think that's that much of an issue. Someone just needs to rearrange the furniture in order for it to be accessible. Also, the carpeting appeared to be low ply, tightly woven, and securely attached. It didn't seem like there would be any problem with that, so that's good. And then some obstacles were cane detectable. The chalk holders may need to be lowered in order to be cane detectable. That was like probably the only issue I think I saw. I'll show you a video now. As you can see here, this space is kind of tight, especially with this podium here for this entrance, but there's a door, as you saw in the beginning of the video, on the other side that was easily accessible. But this podium you can also move, so it's just a matter of rearranging the room in order for it to be more accessible. Here's some more pictures. The one on the left is the podium. It's kind of hard to tell, but there wasn't very much space at all here. And then the picture on the right is part of what you saw in the video, and there's more space to move around in there. So now we're going to talk about emergencies. So the emergency systems provided, they had the flashing blue lights. I think more needed to be added in order to be like seen more clearly. Then they have the fire alarm, and I know they have the fire alarm because I've been in there when they've tested it, and extremely, extremely loud during a fire drill. I found something really interesting. I took a picture of the evacuation route, which is in this picture here, and it did not specify the accessible exits or entrances. So they really need to add the exit locations onto this map here. I thought that was strange because they have it on the actual maps of the building, but not on the evacuation route, which is arguably more important. So the next thing we have is signage for goods and services. So some signs complied with the rules, others did not. Many signs' center lines were less than 60 inches, so 49 inches, they need to move up the signs. Signs as close as possible to the door latches. In this picture here, it doesn't seem like it's as close as it could be, but with the other rules applied, it might be fine where it is. I'm not really sure. I was a little bit confused about that. So the letters on the signs were all 3/4 inches or larger, so that's great. The Braille text was included, but they did lack Braille for some of the written messages. In this picture, you can just see they have the room number in Braille and the word classroom Braille, but the rest of them doesn't have anything. So they would need to add that to all the signs. And there's no pictograms used, so I moved on from there. So next we have directional and informational signage. No signs were above 80 inches in the facility, and some signs complied with the legibility requirements, others failed to do so. Next we'll be talking about controls. All controls accessible to the public were within reach range. Example, as you can see in this picture here, the lights by side reach, equal to 41 inches. And all light switches were operable with a closed fist. As you can see in this picture, you could easily move it up and down with a fist. So we're going to talk about seats, tables, and counters now. So the aisles between fixed seating depended on the room. Example, this room had 27 inches in between certain rows and larger amounts of space between other rows. So I think it would be better if when they were designing this room that to make sure that all the rows had the same amount of space. Many spaces designated for wheelchair seating were designated for wheelchair seating throughout the classroom. As you can see in this picture right here, you could easily move these chairs and put a wheelchair there. So the tops of the tables and the counters were 30 inches high or higher. Knee space was 30 inches in height, 30 inches in width, and 20 inches deep. There were no cashier counters and no food ordering counters because it was a classroom, so we don't really need any of those. Here's some more pictures. You can see this on the left is the front of the classroom, and there's they subtracted lots of spaces, so it would be wheelchair accessible. So you could put a wheelchair there in those spaces. And then on the right is the back of the classroom, and there's a giant table that wraps around like the whole back of the room. And you can move any of those chairs and have a wheelchair there as well. So this is seemed to be very accessible for the outsides and the back, but within, if anyone wanted to move within, there wasn't much room, so they needed to separate those a little more. So vertical circulation, ramps and elevators to all public spaces. There was only ramps and elevators, no lifts or anything like that. There was accessible alternative routes when stairs were presented, except for the entrance across from Old Main. We already discussed that. Stairs. So all stairs throughout the building, inside and outside, had the non-slip tread, which was nice. You can see that in the picture here. And you can see the railings on both sides as well. All stairs have continuous railings, I just said that, on both sides. Some with extensions and some without. Elevators. So there was visible and verbal / audible door opening and closing floor indicators. So there was the one bing for going up and the two bings for going down. I found that really interesting because I never actually known that that's what those bings were for before. So that was really cool. The call buttons were 40 inches off the ground. The call controls had the raised braille lettering, and so did the door jabs at every floor, identifying what floor they were on were also in raised braille. You can see in both these pictures the braille. And the emergency intercom was usable without voice communication because you can just press the call button and they'll know that you need help. And you can talk to them or just press it and they can come and help you. So here's just more pictures of elevators. On the left is the entrance on the first floor, and on the right is the emergency panel. There's also an alarm button at the top there, and you can push for an emergency stop, as well as the emergency call button, and that actually has braille as well, so that's really great too. So for lifts, there were actually no lifts in the building at all, as I already said. There was ramps and elevators, which was great. Next, we'll be moving on to priority 3, which is the usability of restrooms. So getting to restrooms. The main restrooms have accessible stalls. Example, for this one, the women's bathroom of the first floor Willard has one accessible stall. And I put accessible in quotations because of a reason I'll discuss in a few minutes. So the specific accessible restroom is actually located down the hall, and they indicate that by permanent signage. So signage, like I said, is clearly indicated on the door that accessible bathrooms are down the hall. If you look at the top picture, it shows on the bottom that the accessible restrooms are R59. So the lettering does follow the signage guidelines, but they need to add braille lettering to show that the accessible bathroom is down the hallway. They have the braille for the women's bathroom part and the number of their room, but they don't have to say the accessible restroom is down the hallway. So they need to add that in there. Pictograms and symbols that are used have raised characters and braille included. The doorway equaled 37 inches, and the doors have accessible handles. So the outside, you push it, and the inside is a handle, and it's seen from the inside that you could use a fist to get it open. The doors can be opened with less than 5 pounds of force, so that's good. And the entrance provides 6 feet of space for wheelchair maneuvers. Also, the pathway to fixtures was 70 inches. So, stalls. The stall doors were operable with a closed fist inside and out. They weren't very easy to open with a closed fist, but if you had to do it, you could. But the door does swing outward automatically, especially for this stall alone. The other ones swing inwards, as you can see from this picture, but you can see that this accessible stall, which is the one all the way on the right, is the door is actually swinging outward. So you really don't need to use the handle on the outside. If it was a problem, you can just change the knob on the outside to make it a little bit bigger. So the wheelchair accessible stall, the dimensions were 57 inches by 52. Personally, I did not see how that was wide enough for anyone using a wheelchair to maneuver in it. So I feel they need to move or remove one of the partitions to make that bathroom wider, so it's easier to move around, because even I had a little bit of trouble moving around, and I don't use a wheelchair. So the 2 grab bars on either side of the toilet, so that's helpful. You can see that in the top picture, and there's a sink in there too, but you can kind of even see in the picture that it's really small and it's not very helpful. So the toilet seat was 21 inches high, and you can see this giant piece that's added to the top, which makes it too high. It needs to be lower just several inches and it would be fine. So the lavatory had a 33-inch wide and 56-inch deep clear space. The lavatory room was 34 inches, and it was exactly 29 inches from the floor to the bottom of the lavatory apron. The faucet can be operated with one closed fist. You can see that, either one, just you can use easily. The soap and the hand dryers and / pair of towels were within reach range, and you could also use your fist for that. The mirror bottom edge reflecting the surface is 40 inches high exactly. So now we're going to move on to priority 4, which is our last priority, and this is the additional access. So drinking fountains. All fountains have a clear space of around 7 feet around them. You can see there's a ton of space in this area. The fountains had only one height, and that height was 40 inches, which really need to be lower. It was pretty high, and need to possibly add cup dispensers. All controls mounted were on the top of the fountain, so they really need to add some controls on the sides because it wasn't very helpful. And the fountain is cane detectable because it's from the bottom, it's 14 inches high. Although the protrusion was 1 feet from the wall. So that is a lot, but the wall did, on the left side, the wall does kind of protrude out anyway, so it's kind of a weird way the building is built. There were actually no telephones in the building that were accessible to the public. If you go towards the entrance that's across from Old Main, they used to have telephones there, but since most people have cell phones now, they removed that, so there were no telephones or anything like that that were accessible to the public. So here's a few lists of pros and cons that I put together just to kind of summarize what we talked about. So some of the pros were the building was provided various alternative accessible entrances, which was the one on Pollock Road and the one around back at the parking lot. So they fulfilled most of the length, width, and height requirements for each section. Some things were lacking, but overall they were pretty good, but some things definitely should be changed. The elevators were also easily accessible. Those were nice. Like, they were a little bit older, but they still worked just fine. The parking lot was easily accessible with plenty of accessible spaces, except for that one space had the weird access aisle. So maybe if they just add another access aisle, that would be nice. The restrooms are also pretty accessible, and they have the extra bathroom that's like specified as an accessible bathroom, so I thought that was nice. And the signage inside provided help, but they really needed some outside help too. So cons: the main entrance had stairs but no ramp, and that's the entrance that students use the most, so I thought that was strange that they didn't have a ramp there. No signs indicated accessible pathways from the main entrance. I actually just mentioned that, but I wish they would have added signs so you know which ways to go around. The classrooms were missing several dimensions, including the 5-foot circle, so they need to add that. And like I said, for a lot of the classrooms, you just need to rearrange the chairs, but for the ones that aren't, you would have to rebuild. So the materials and services are not that easily accessible. Closer than 36 inches in many of the classrooms. And there were several signs for the classrooms that did not comply with the rules of signage, so they would need to be fixed as well. The signs need to be higher from the floor and may need to be close to the door. Sorry. Overall, the building seemed fairly accessible, but of course, like I've been saying the entire time, there's always room for improvements. I mentioned several of them. If they really weren't hard things to improve, so if Willard and the Penn State builders could come in and fix those things, then the building could be really accessible. But for now, I would just say it's fairly accessible. Thank you so much for listening to my project, and have a wonderful